All right, welcome everybody to another Metabolic Mentor podcast where we interview individuals of greatness with great accomplishments in the field of life and in health. And today, this is probably going to be my favorite podcast I've done so far. If anyone's interested in women's health, metabolic studies, metabolic research, we're going to dive deep today. So strap in. My next guest is a PhD with over 200 scientific papers and abstracts related to nutrition and physique enhancement, a professor of exercise science and a director of the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory at the University of South Florida for over 18 years, a published writer of 3 books in the sports nutrition space, and now has a big passion for women's health and metabolic studies focusing on hormones, weight loss, and metabolic health. I also would just like to point out a dear friend of mine and someone I hope to do much in the future with, Dr. Bill Campbell.
Wow, that's quite the intro.
Well, I think it's well-deserved,
Well,
and I'm going to let all my people know because this is one that they've wanted for a long time. I get messages all the time about people that I should interview.
Yeah.
This is number 1 right now, so I think everyone's going to have a great time with this. So
Well, tell your audience that they're my number 1 audience.
Yeah, that's right.
The feeling is mutual.
Yes, and so much that I want to get to, but a lot of my my community is getting to know you a little bit, and so would you just tell the people a little bit about you?
So I'm going to start as an adult because
Yes.
I'll skip the boring stuff. But when I first went to college, I went for marketing for business, and I didn't do well. So I realized I'm not a good business person, but I loved lifting weights. I loved bodybuilding, and I loved the physiology of dietary supplements. So I'm old enough that I remember right when creatine monohydrate came on the scene. So that dates me a little bit. So I just love the science of supplements.
Yeah.
So got out. My job after college was to sell bug killer and weed killer.
Yeah, we've all had our moments.
Yeah. I wasn't excited about selling weed killer. And I thought, I read a quote somewhere. The quote was, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that left an impression on me. So I went back to college, starting from scratch, no science classes. So just community college, getting a course here, another college course there. Then finally made the move to Texas at Baylor University, got my master's in exercise physiology, and then I stayed there for my PhD. That was in exercise, nutrition, and preventive health.
Yeah.
And then when I got out, I said to my wife, where do you want to live? Now I have my PhD, I can apply all over the country. She said, we can live anywhere you want as long as it's hot. So I drew a line across the nation, and I only applied to jobs in the South, Arizona, Florida, and then I ended up at USF.
USF, excellent. Yep. Well, that answers the question about why a researcher chooses this very specific field of sports nutrition, physique enhancement. I love it, but it's a unique area, right? And I was always wondering why you particularly chose it. And it sounds like you just had a love and a passion for physique and sports nutrition.
I love fat loss. I love building muscle. I'm a recreational bodybuilder scientist. That's what I do. And I learn from bodybuilders. I learn from coaches, fat loss coaches. And I'll say this. I think all professors, most exercise science people, want to do what I do.
Yes.
But they chase the grant money because there's no grant money in making girls' glutes bigger.
Yeah,
there's no grant money in building bigger muscles. There is if you focus on sarcopenia. So I made a decision. I'm not going to get these big $1 million grants.
Yeah.
But I don't care because that sucks the joy out of building muscle in young people. And now, as you know, because we've talked many a late nights, I am so passionate about the middle-aged woman going through menopause.
Yeah.
Now, there may be some funding there, but again, I don't do this for the funding. I do this because I study what I want to study.
I think that speaks to a lot, though, to what we're about to talk about in your character, and it shows up in the work that you do, and one of the reasons that I've come to trust you so much and why I'm such a big fan, and it was very much the same thing for me. I did the thing that I wanted to do because I loved to do it until it made me money. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people do it the opposite. What's going to make me money, and can I figure out how to love it?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that shows up in the work long term, in the body of work. I think it has a big impact, and that's what we're going to kind of get to in your long tenured career now of over 20 years at this point, or close to.
Oh yeah, if you count my schooling, well over 20.
Well over 20 years in the field, and so. One of the things I got to tell you a story is that when I met this man, we were both speaking at an event with Taylor's event, Haas, and I listened to him on stage, and I'd seen some of his work, and I listened to him on stage talking about everything that my clinical evidence between our medical teams and our coaching teams had seen, and he was starting to show it in some data where we didn't have that before. And I was just jumping in the background. I'm like, I got to speak to this guy, and turns out he was looking to speak to me as well, which was great. And so we sat down, and that first meeting, I think we spoke for I think it went for three and a half hours.
Late at night. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember it.
And then I was like, all right, this is a guy that I definitely want to do more work with. So that's how this thing started. And so, I guess before we narrow in on women, right, because we want to talk about metabolic studies when we talk about metabolisms and subpopulations, right? But I think the first question that I'd like to ask you is, we'll go big picture, macro into micro. And, by 2030, they say that half of the United States will not just be overweight, but obese. And, we see in the medical world their attempt at a solution. We see in, maybe let's say, the weight loss industry, we will see their solution. And then there's really the fitness, because I wouldn't say that they're the same. I'd say the fitness industry and the weight loss industry are not completely the same. And we'll see that in many different ways. And we see that now in physique enhancement and metabolic research, the emphasis on different things where other people might just say, hey, it's caloric restriction and cardio. The fitness world would say something different, right? And we would say that in fitness research, what we've seen. And so there's a big divide on how to solve the problem. I think from a global perspective and from a United States perspective. And we have a big disparity in social media about what causes fat gain, I think, and what people should do about it. And I guess where I want to start is give me your thoughts on what your over 20 years of research has really shown you, and what do you think is the biggest players involved in why we're approaching half of Americans being obese?
So I would be someone who subscribes to the energy balance equation. Sure. So calories in, calories out. That purview explains almost everything as I read research, as I talk to people, as I analyze research. Except, and again, I wasn't prepared to say this 2-3 years ago, except for this middle-aged woman going through perimenopause, early post-menopause. Yeah. I'm open to the idea that there's something else going on. Yes. I don't know what it is. That's why I talk to you for 3 hours in the middle of the night, because I'm trying to learn. Yeah. So I'm going to say that that's a special, potentially a special circumstance.
Yeah, and we're going to narrow in on that in some of these subcultures. Yep. That's what I mean, these subpopulations in just a second. I think we both can agree. I mean, even if you were to just represent the scientific community, and let's say I represented the holistic community, right, just for a second, I think even the most holistic or out there practitioner has to, and if they don't, you're just entirely ignoring science, is that calorie maintenance or calorie balance must be maintained as we look at the law of thermodynamics, and we understand that your caloric intake is probably one of the largest factors. Yep. I would probably put in the loss of walking is probably my number one.
Okay, and let me also, if you're going to speak culturally, I love that. But just what I'll call an obesogenic environment, the ultra-processed foods that are so addictive. Yes. So when you asked from a macro, yes, I never even considered the loss of walking. That's just how many calories is that costing us? Yes. But also, I can't I can't go 4 miles without passing at least 5 chicken what do you call it? Chick-fil-A,
Chick-fil-A's,
Popeye,
McDonald's, all that. Yeah.
Yes, and then grocery. So yes.
So when you match people's what appears to be increasing appetite, which we'll talk about what we kind of see from potentially diet culture, when you take the loss of walking, yep, right, and then you put that body and that metabolism into a high caloric, highly processed carbohydrate environment, oftentimes what you get is obesity. And I would add as an accelerator, in comes in diet culture, 1950, which I believe our bodies are environments that adapt, right? Our bodies adapt to our environments over time.
Yep.
And I believe we're beginning to adapt to chronic dieting, particularly shown in females and maybe even subcultures or subpopulations is a better word, of women who now are approaching the stage of perimenopause and menopause, who are one of the first generations that started chronic dieting and being a part of diet culture from a very early age.
Yes.
Because before 1950, it was actually popular to be curvy.
Yeah.
You know, and then once everybody came home from war, and then you had the popularization or commercialization of white picket fence, Susie Q, homemaker, who looked perfect, you start seeing this strong move to diet products. When we see expenditure on products and programs, the United States just starts to kind of take off.
Yep.
And has never slowed down. But the irony is we spend more than anyone, but we're also in first world countries. We're still the most obese, have the most cardiovascular disease. And so it's just interesting to look at spend. The more that we spend, the fatter we get, which is a super interesting phenomena. Your thoughts?
I just was when you said the loss of walking, it reminded me of a study, and this study was landmark, and it's going to support your theory. And I'm sure we have data. I'm not a walking.
I've seen quite a bit, but
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So so people are walking less. But this study was, I think it was in the 1950s, in post-World War II. So the Industrial Revolution is taking off. And they studied, this was and it wasn't it was one of the European countries. I can get you the citation. What they did, they studied a large industrial company. They had office workers, very sedentary. On the other end of the extreme, they had the factory workers who were walking tens of thousands of steps. And then they had couriers that were in the middle. What they found was that when the most sedentary people had the highest, or they had an unregulated appetite, or a dysregulated appetite. That was that was what the word they used. So the more sedentary you are, the more dysregulated your appetite is.
Yeah.
What that means is you don't know when to stop eating during a meal because you don't have the sensation of feeling full. Yeah. And you eat between meals when you're not hungry. Everything about your appetite is dysregulated. The more that they moved, steps essentially, the more regulated their appetite was. And what that means is two things. They stopped eating when they felt full, and they did not eat again until they were hungry. Now, people would say, well, of course, that's how it is. That is not how it is when you have a dysregulated appetite.
Yes.
You don't know when to stop eating, and you eat when you're not hungry.
Yeah.
And you also look at this, the people that had the regulated appetites who were walking more, they ate significantly more food, and they were not overweight.
Yes.
So what you just said, I can give you a study which supports that.
So it's interesting how things like walking and other observable things in our environment have an impact on probably our hormonal states and our behaviors that create an auto-regulation. Or one of the things that I like to think a lot about is a governor that's very flexible on caloric intake to still maintain body weight.
Yep.
And I think we can see from the physique enhancement, and I wish medicine would pay attention to bodybuilding more often, because I think we can learn a lot about how the human system, when it works perfectly, we can observe behavior when it doesn't work right, what are we looking at? Mm-hmm. And it's been one of my greatest advantages to start in bodybuilding and then move to functional health, because I can see it a little more clearly. Because, for example, you can take the right person, if you train them, they do a lot, their stress management's good, they sleep a lot, they're training correctly. I mean, that person might be able to eat 3,000 calories and maintain their weight.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you take that same person who I'll see in a different environment, different situation, not feeding themselves correctly later on, they're gaining weight at 2,200 calories. So you can see how the body has this adaptive process to survive, the survival mechanism of creating stasis and how we unnaturally or unknowingly, through first world technology, have taken us out of the environment that created that natural autoregulator. And I think that's part of what we're seeing in today's society. And walking is one of those governors that I think we're missing. And the data is very clear about 2-hour walking. So postprandial walking is probably the most healthy thing that you can do, maybe even above working out for longevity. I mean, they're saying there's some pretty good research that shows that.
That's awesome.
That's fascinating. Okay. So what effect do you think diet culture has had on American society?
I would suggest, and let me ask you, when you say diet culture, define that for me. Just the commercialization.
The commercialization, the overcapitalization, the trends, the marketing, and so now you're looking at highest per capita rates of purchasing products and services in and around weight loss specifically.
All right, I got you. I would say it is a hyper focus on the scale and a total disregard for lean mass in the dieting process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So when we assume that the problem is weight and we focus on the symptom, we oftentimes make the symptom worse.
Yep.
And
long term, yes.
Yeah, and I've been such a big fan. The more I look at your research and then some of the research that you've compiled, the bigger of a fan I get, because I think a lot of the stuff that you talk about makes it more clear than ever that there's a right way and a wrong way in many ways. And it sets us up for potential long-term disaster.
Yeah.
In how we choose to diet. And that's why I get concerned when I hear just eat less, move more. While I'm a fan, I understand that you're doing that for energy balance. Mm-hmm. And we understand that over-consuming calories and not walking is a big part of the problem. However, if we chronically do that, that can actually make it so much harder to maintain weight later. That's kind of the interesting catch-22 of it all.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Are you going to diet forever?
Right.
Like, that's the end game of that advice.
Yes. Right. It's like a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, okay, well, hey, here's the solution. If you're at 1,800 calories and you're losing weight, and then you can't maintain anymore at that, just eat 1,600. And then if you can't maintain at that, just eat 1,400. And if you can't maintain at that, then eat 1,200.
Yep.
And before I know it, this is where women, I think, unfairly from that advice have been hurt in certain populations, because that advice then leads you to, I'm eating very low calorie. Whenever I eat higher, my governor doesn't work, so I just store fat. It leads to, maybe periods of either even hyperphagia or hyperplasia, where quick fat gain.
Yep.
And then now all of a sudden I have very low muscle, I've got more fat, and my metabolic rate has been adjusted to an environment that is not suitable for a high calorie, high carbohydrate environment.
Yeah.
Right? And I think those are the things that we run into. And so, I would say that single-handedly one of the largest causes of our weight problem today is our obsession with losing weight.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad that we see eye into that. Let's talk about dieting specifically, and let's talk about caloric deficits in general.
All right.
I think this is a great topic, and the exploration of caloric deficits. And so in the field, we understand, I think, when you look at the untrained male or female, that means isn't using resistance training, isn't accounting for protein, and is considering high output, high stress through just cardio in life, and decides to not eat a lot of food, so caloric restriction, in order to lose weight. What are the ramifications potentially of that individual who repetitively does that? Like when we look at females, I mean, the research is becoming clear more every day. It would appear that even from almost the age of 13, the average woman's going to try to lose weight twice a year, every year, until she's like 61, 62 years old by way of not eating.
Yeah, so that's what I would call the perpetual dieter. And I think what you said earlier, I agree with. We're seeing the manifestation of that in this, what I'm still going to have to say, potential weight loss resistance, or this body fat issues that a lot of women are having, that have been fit for much of their life, but maybe they have been artificially keeping body fat levels so low,
Yeah.
they get to a certain age where the body says, I'm done. You've fought me for the last 10 years, and I am fighting. Now, again, don't know. That's just what's in my head. I have to think of what's going on here. Because I know, as we've talked off the podcast, a lot of women are gaining weight that everything about them says they shouldn't be.
Yeah, we've got some really cool stuff to talk about, so stay tuned to the end because you're going to want to hear about this in this area. Bill is going to be one of the researchers that finally focuses on women and women's metabolic issues to bring us answers on the question of, is weight loss resistance real? Right?
Yeah.
You know,
it's a good question to ask.
It's
yes.
a good question.
But we're not getting there yet.
But
I know.
not yet. I just love this. We're getting ahead. Okay. So the reason I bring this up, and I think this is important because I've followed a lot of your presentations and I've looked at a lot of your work. And one of the arguments that you make is that even particularly in lean people or leanish, let's say, right? If they don't account for protein and some form of resistance training, or they overtrain or they're in some other environment, if they lose a lot of weight, but they also lose muscle because they're not accounting for it, that has massive implication in those individuals. I went back, one of the things too that I was looking at was, of course, the Minnesota starvation study.
Yes.
Also, the study where they were looking at the men in the military. They were looking at when lean people diet.
Yes.
And the huge gains that happened. And then even looking at the twin study where they were looking at twins and the twin that would
that dieted the most. Weighs the most.
Right. And so that wasn't a genetic thing, that's an environmental thing, which proves that.
They were identical twins.
They were identical twins. And one of the things that was most shocking to me about that was that people could significantly, and you usually see this, where someone will go through their first major weight loss in their life. And I think that's why early education is going to become so important, so that people don't mess it up in the beginning.
Yep.
If you don't mess it up in the beginning, I think you change metabolic behavior over your entire life. That's one of my key beliefs. And so I'm hoping later on from this research and other things that parents can talk to their kids and try to find a way to offset the phenomena of diet culture before it starts, right?
Yes.
Which is going to be a hard task, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about this. So one of some of the phenomena that I want people to understand when we talk about metabolism, and let's say we're looking at total daily energy expenditure, and we understand that the body has unique features of how it can adapt how many calories you're burning in your activity or when you eat food or when you're just laying and being asleep, but also in human behavior and how that changes. So it's particularly we saw in the Minnesota starvation studies, we saw that once everybody came out of their starvation period, that there was controlled feeding for a few, it was like 3 to 5, 8 weeks.
12, maybe 12. 12 or 8.
It looked like 12.
Yep,
I
think it was 12.
And that was controlled. So we don't know if they would have just went higher much quicker. But you start to see fat come up pretty quickly.
Yep.
But you also start to see the muscle come back. Now, this is also, just to be clear, and this is one of the problems, this study was on men. Okay, so let's focus on that because I think androgen hormones make it easier for muscle to return post-diet in men than in females. But what I would say is that then we saw this period of what we call your hyperphagia.
Yes.
Right?
Where they were allowed to eat whatever they wanted. No more controls.
No more controls. And in that period, you saw huge increases in caloric intake, but it was almost all fat during that period.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so we see what we call a collateral fattening, where you diet, you lose fat. If you lose too much muscle, when you go into your uncontrolled, let's say, refeed environment, which is whatever a human being's doing without, take out the control of the Minnesota study. I think this happens much faster. That's the only thing. They controlled those 12 weeks.
Yep.
In the wilderness, per se, that's not there. Most people are chronically dieting with no advisement.
Yep.
They're jumping right back in, and I bet their stomachs grow back out or open up probably within 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm guessing that hyperphagia happens sooner. But what I noticed, what was fascinating in this study is right when they hit lean mass, approximately back to where they were before they they lost the weight, that's when the hyperphagia seemed to really take off, right?
That's where, so when they gained the muscle back, that is where hyperphagia ended, meaning that they had this uncontrollable appetite, and they keep gaining fat and gaining fat and gaining fat. They, like you said, they gained more fat after the study than what they had before they started the starvation. And all of these bad adaptations did not stop until the lean mass was returned.
Yeah.
So that's one of several lines of evidence that I rely on that says, or that makes me believe, you have to preserve muscle. At all costs, preserve muscle, which is really an indictment against crash dieting.
Yes, diet culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless you get a little more advanced, which is what we talked about and what some research I'm doing now.
Yes.
You can do things in a way that is very aggressive, but yet protects muscle. So there's some nuance.
Right.
But in general, if you lose muscle, you are setting yourself up for a failure in the long term.
Yes. And this is where I think we can, for kids and women and everybody who are trying to lose weight, they can have their cake and eat it too if they do some of the right things, which is what we're going to get to at the end of this podcast, earlier in life. And so this is my argument. Diet culture in 1950, people are crash dieting, they're cardio bunnies, all this stuff's happening. Yeah. You don't see the intro to fitness principles and the gym and the emphasis on protein and resistance training to protect muscle until 1980, right? And so that's what
at least, like I was thinking you were going to say the 90s. So,
but but it starts to intro itself.
Yes.
And then remember, you had the Perillo bars. Do you remember eating the chalk?
Yeah, the Perillo and Captree, MCT oil.
Yeah, Captree and MCT oil.
Yep.
Yeah. And then MCT made its comeback because like back then it was like, in those bars too, it was like terrible.
I have that John Perillo's book in my office at the university. I think that's where it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then back then it was kind of like if it fits at Chips macros where it's like get your Twinkies, lift heavy weights, then get your protein, you know what I mean? So now half those power lifters that I used to admire all have diabetes and have lost a foot, but it's that's that. We're learning through the process. So but this is why I think today's kids are having such a harder time. And part of it is particularly with women. Those studies, when you also look at a rapid fat gain and you look at leptin resistance and leptin signaling, because leptin is the hunger, kind of the satiated hormone for the most part, right? Ghrelin's going to drive, and then you look at its relationship to insulin, and insulin and leptin in the balance. One of the things that becomes apparent to me is that when we have rapid moments of fat gain, it does appear to have an impact on leptin, and it also seems to have an impact on hyperplasia. So rapid fat gain creating more fat cells.
Okay.
Right? And then we also see an increase in hyperplasia when estrogen goes to zero. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping eventually you're going to look at in your research, because I know we're looking at hormones in females and if they're using hormone therapy or not.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that we're going to see that eventually hormone therapy is weight protective over time.
Yep.
And I think because there is a lot of data that shows that going perimenopausal can create hyperplasia and gaining fat quickly.
Yep. Now, I'm an applied scientist, so I'm looking at applied outcomes, body fat levels. I'm not looking at hyperplasia and hypertrophy of fat cells. So that's something that I won't be looking at. But overall fat gain, absolutely.
Yes, overall fat gain, right.
Yep.
But it does appear that kids, and so whether you look at this as the specific mechanism or you just look at it on a total fat gain basis, kids that lose a lot and gain a lot earlier in life typically end up being more overweight later in life. And I think it does have to do with this leptin resistance and hyperplasia, making it harder for them for sure. Then when you apply standard nutritional strategies of diet culture, not fitness nutrition, but diet culture, they're now compounding on the same bad idea that then puts them through the stages of, hyperphagia, where they eat more They don't have the leptin insulin balance to try to utilize the nutrition correctly to maybe help upregulate the metabolism when calories go up.
Yep.
So I think that governor just of like what we call, what I like to call all state metabolism, where it's an accident forgiveness.
Oh, yeah.
I do believe in that when we're younger and the body's ability to upregulate itself to maintain balance, and you just starts to erode. And then we look at the menopausal female who can't get away with an extra 50 calories without it showing up clearly on their body in many ways, or at least what is that mechanism? But we see the behavior at least, you know, and so that's what is so important to me, I think, about the data, things that you're doing now, because being able to teach kids, which I want to get into here soon, about how to diet earlier, I think is going to prevent some of these physiologic adaptive responses that are happening in a chronically dieted environment.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, I know as a researcher, your job is to eliminate as much bias as possible, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And bias and extraneous variables. So we want to control for as much as we can and only introduce one variable.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And so I know, and one of the things I find fascinating about your journey is that, and this is like, you're kind of like, to the functional folks, it's kind of like Darth Vader's coming to the good side, you know? Like, only what I mean by that is that we allow the evidence to tell us a story. And so you as a researcher, to stay unbiased as best you can, but you've been studying these metabolic sciences for over 20 years, you start to develop certain beliefs based on what the data says and then maybe the observable environment around you, right? You try to leave it at the door when you apply it to research, but you develop opinions, as you should.
Yes. Yeah.
What I'm fascinated to know is, because like my world's been turned upside down 3 or 4 times, and I had to decide whether I was going to stay stuck on my soapbox or chase the truth. In the scientific community, there's a lot of opinions. What are the things that have remained true in your beliefs and then also in the science of when you started researching in this field, and what has begun to change?
All right, so the things that have remained true are going to be very no kidding. So
Right.
lifting weights makes you stronger.
Yes.
Lifting weights builds muscle.
Yes.
Things that I question, well,
Well, protein is important. Hey,
yes. So just today I read a study. So protein is important. I've done several protein studies. I would call myself a high protein advocate.
Yeah.
I think it helps control appetite. It has the highest thermic effect of food. Anecdotally, before I was ever a scientist, and maybe this shaped me, I won't even get into it. I'll say this. Throughout my life, when I see a middle-aged or older woman who's very lean, I'm a fat loss researcher, so I'm weird. I'll go up and say, "Hey, I'm a scientist. What do you do that makes you so lean?" And it's always these 3 things. They eat a lot of food, they eat a lot of protein, and they exercise a lot. Resistance training and cardio. But back to the things that I question. Well, not every study supports that protein is that higher protein intakes are better. Not every study. But the best design studies, including studies from my own lab, which of course I better believe my data because I know how it was conducted, that leads me to believe that a relatively high protein diet is the best diet for living a lean life.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that, what if I don't eat high protein for 6 months? I would say, you're not going to be harmed as long as you're still training. You won't even lose muscle.
Yeah.
So let me try to think. Is there anything else?
To that point, even though I implore all diets as a technology or a tool,
Yeah.
whether it's a ketogenic diet, whether it's Mediterranean lower protein, sparing diets, all those things.
Real quick, though. Whenever we talk about Mediterranean, you call it lower protein. I think you're comparing it to these bodybuilding gram per pound.
Yes.
I don't really know if it really is that low compared to the general population.
This is a great topic. It is Mediterranean low protein. And the answer I would say is, comparatively speaking to fitness research and fitness dieting,
Yes.
It is low protein. I think that we'll find, though, that oftentimes 20% your caloric intake is reasonable. I would say compared to most diets, though, that are around today, that would be classified as low. I think I think to stay optimal, though, we have what we call high protein Mediterranean. I don't want people to forget about fiber, eating diversity. I don't want them to forget about the use of different kinds of carbohydrates, from fructose to grains to the different things. I don't want them to lose sight of that. They're fruits and vegetables. At the same time, I think you are right. I like to see about 30 to 40% in an optimal world of your caloric intake come from protein, and then seasonally reduce it for what I believe is diet variation, which is just good, healthy cycling on the body.
So I love that concept. So you were the first one to use that for me. So as I counsel a lot of women who are struggling, I'm not a coach, but I try to help a lot of people. Having that conversation with you, and I don't remember if it was on the phone or where, but that has stuck in my head, this diet variation. So if somebody comes to me and says, Dr. Campbell, I've been eating, a gram per pound of protein. I've been doing this and this, and then I'll ask, well, has that been working? No, that's why I'm reaching out to you. I'm like, then change it. And I used, again, you've impressed upon me the concept of diet variation. Let's try something new. Your body is an experiment. So anyway, diet variation, that has had a big impact on how I would coach.
Yeah.
And not just women, but men. So I love the premise or the philosophical purview of diet variation. If what you're doing is not working, stop beating your head against the wall and let's try, let's say you're currently doing Mediterranean.
Yep.
All right, let's try keto for a while. Let's see, how does your body respond to this? Exactly. You're not going to do keto the rest of your life, I don't think. Yeah. But maybe that's how your body responds. All right, I interrupted you.
That's beautiful. But I think the way to say to somebody is, like, oftentimes if you've been doing something for a really long time, if you do the opposite, you're going to get a pro effect because your body's not acclimated to that stimulus. So let's say, for example, let's talk about training, for example, right? If I've been doing 5 rep sets, and I've been lifting heavier, and I've been doing that now for 12 to 18 weeks. Let's say I've begun to plateau, obviously, because I've been doing the same lifts for that long. Yep. One of the ways that you might strategize an improvement is to drop the weight significantly and go high rep for a little while, right? Yep. So, and I think that's just a general, we could get more technical, but in general, so for example, if I'm doing really high protein, low carb, whatever, switch it up for even just a week or two, which is what the flush was all about.
Yeah, see what happens.
See what happens. Oftentimes people get a great response from that, and if they do enough of that, they can go back to doing the thing that they love to do, and it seems to work again. And that's why the principle of diet variation has always been pretty obvious to me. And so I'm glad that that's had an effect, and hopefully we'll see through research how that actually does play out. Because I do believe, like the placebo effect, I believe that diet researchers have been looking at diet variation and not realizing that's what they were looking at for a long time, just like the placebo effect. Yep. We didn't know that's what we were observing, that 1 in 5 people, basically, if they believed they were getting better, got better. Yep. It didn't dawn on us till later. And I believe you're already noticing that the microbiome changes that could potentially occur from different diets, what that might do to human performance or metabolism. You're beginning to explore that potential. I think that we're going to find through diet variation is one of the reasons that in all 12-week studies or lower that we're seeing a change, not just from the calories, but because of the complete change in proteins into a different structure of macros and of fiber and just other proteins in the body. Yep. That's why when I designed the flush, the whole idea is whatever you've been eating, don't eat that for at least 2 weeks. Switch it to things that are totally different. Break the cycle for a second. And we seem to see a inflammation drop, even if what you were eating was anti-inflammatory before and you moved to other anti-inflammatory foods. We still see a drop in swelling, retention, just a lot of things. So we know that there's something to be said for. Every diet works if you work it until you work it too long. And that would be, I guess, what I would probably say to that.
Yes, that's an elongated diet variation.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So you've observed this hyperphagia phenomena, and we've observed that diet culture is eroding muscle. And really, because we're not accounting for muscle mass in diet culture, it's single-handedly probably been one of the biggest disservices to people. When they start dieting at a young age, then they get hooked and they can't leave. It's almost like heroin, kind of like it's like here, start this, it's free, and then now I have to do it all the time to maintain any kind of semblance of life. I guess where I would go with that is, what are the ways that people, when they're in diet culture, what are ways that they can escape it? What are things that now you've said, and we can talk about in research, what do people need to be doing when they diet now to prevent collateral fattening?
I would say, and I know you'll agree, let's stop, and this is easy to say and so hard to do. Let's stop chasing weight loss. Can we change your perspective to healthy habits? So can we get you to increase your step count for somebody starting? Can I ask you to please go to the gym to lift weights once a week, once every other week? So, and then we start, checking off. Well, I go twice a week for the last 3 months. I'm walking, 8,000 steps per day when I used to get 3,000. Can we just get the focus off of the scale? And the funny thing is, when I would allow you to go back and check in, your body composition will be a change, even though you weren't chasing it, because we changed your perspective from scale to drinking more water, eating more healthy foods, getting more steps, actually trying to get stronger. I think that's the...
Yeah, and I think, so let's talk about the environmental necessity or the environmental input of the gym. So the advent of the gym doesn't really get popular again till the 1980s. So someone might make the argument to you, Bill, why do we need the gym? We didn't need the gym before, and people maintain their weight just fine. Why do we need the gym today? And by the way, we've added the gym, and it just seems like America's fatter. So why would we need the gym?
So that's where I would say, well, America at large is without the gym. So if that's your comparison, there's my argument. Yeah. If you look at the subculture of people who embrace the gym, I'll take that argument every day. Yeah. Now, I have an empathy for people who've never been a fitness lifestyle. It's very intimidating to go to a commercial gym.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm telling you, even though they might not say it, they are well, I know because this is what they tell me. People are laughing at me. They're looking at me. And sadly, that's probably true in some situations. So when I say the gym, like it doesn't, like, let's have you do a knee push-up or something against, like, anything to get your body to move. Or I love just saying, just get out of breath. Just get out of breath. You don't have to worry about steps. You don't have to worry about treadmill. You don't have to worry about miles. Do something where you are gasping for breath.
Right.
Huge
help. Well, that's where the walk to simulate movement, and they've even shown studies where walking will build muscle, which is fascinating.
All the time, every time.
Yes.
But I didn't know that until I looked at the research.
Yes, exactly. We wouldn't know that. But the second thing is, I feel that what the gym does today and why we have to simulate former life, Paleolithic life, why we have to simulate it in a gym today, where we may not have had the need to do it before, is that the stress stimulus of holding something heavy, people do not use their bodies anymore. They're not lifting heavy things. They don't have to maintain strength. And we can argue about whether muscle mass has anything to do with longevity, but strength certainly does in the research, right?
Yep.
And so if I don't apply the stimulus of heavy things on my body, then I will significantly downregulate its metabolic ability, and its health markers, because it starts to behave just like you said, the sedentary worker, how it changed their behavior, but also apparently their metabolic ability. And so I believe that's why it is necessary. I get on this with my father all the time. He's getting older. He does work on the farm, but he just walks a lot, which is good. We got the first one. You're walking. But, Dad, you don't realize you're less and less now. You're not picking that thing up off the floor because it's way down there.
Yeah.
You're not going to pick yourself up over a fence the way you used to. You're not picking up the bale of hay. You're not carrying the buckets anymore. Human beings are not using their human body. So they need to go simulate it in a 30-minute environment
Yes.
in a box gym.
Carry a kettlebell or
Yeah.
what? It's funny. One of the things I always think of with it's the same context. Just think of getting on a horse. I have to. What strength do I need to pull myself up, get my leg over the horse, and then ride the horse and not fall off, or getting into the carriage?
That's right.
Like just those, or brushing the horse, or putting the shoes on. Like just maintaining a horse. You had to be pretty functionally fit to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Pre-automobile.
Exactly. And so because we lose that, again, I think it hurts the number of mitochondria we have per cell, which then has a net effect on our TDEE for sure over time. So that's why I think then you're right. Fitness becomes so important. But now, fitness culture comes 1980, becomes much more popular in 1990. We're seeing it hit the younger. We're seeing it 2000s for sure. And now you've got this big world of what we see bodybuilding, but I also see in bodybuilding females, and I wish they would study this subculture more often of every woman that's ever, I think a great survey would be every woman that has ever applied for a show and then looking at them 20 years later.
I would love to see that data.
Yeah.
I have some of them come visit me in my lab. Some are impressive.
Some are.
Some are
A mess.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so.
There are psychological reasons. There are many inputs for this, so I don't mean to suggest anything other than looking at the subgroup, because this is where research, in my opinion, in metabolism fails, and this is I want to get your feedback on this. Why is it that in research we cannot search by demographic?
Well, you can as long as a researcher chooses to seek out a demographic. So you just need somebody that has the resources and interest.
Yeah, but one of the things that's interesting when you go on any research site, I can't put in female, black, 35, perimenopause, and find out
as a
all
search
the
term.
data. Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I never.
Because
It's
ultimately,
not that I'm aware of.
yeah. So it's just it dawned on me. I'm like, because the problem with information is too much information that is not really tailored to you isn't that helpful.
Yeah.
Right. So there are generalities that we can observe across populations, right? About protein, about activity, about the gym. I mean, we can make those generalities about the sexes and different ages, and then even in women, the different maturities that occur hormonally, those changes that happen both on a cellular level and then on a psychological level and behavior. But the problem is that we have a lot of people over social media utilizing metabolic research that is done on 12 males that are 19 years old and saying to women that are 35 and going into perimenopause that this is what they should be doing.
Yep.
And I see a huge problem with this. And so my concern is that, and this is why I love you so much, is because you're beginning to recognize that this area of women saying they're having metabolic issues is being totally ignored. Everyone's just assuming that they're lying. And then they are not being studied, right?
They have never been studied.
They've never been studied.
If a woman who says, I'm having trouble losing weight, there has never been one study on that population. And that's one of my pet peeves. First, we have to ask, is the study in humans? Yes or no? I always want to rely on human data if it exists. The second thing is, was it an intervention study, randomized, double-blind? The next most important thing is, what population did they use? Exactly to your point. Don't use rats, first of all. Don't use young males, or in my case, I've studied young females in enhancing their body composition. That's not a good proxy for perimenopausal, early postmenopausal women.
Which gets me to my point about research, is that we need to be able to search research by demographic and environment. And what do I mean by this? The human body is not a machine. Otherwise, I just give it an exact input, it would give me an exact output every single time. But as I give it an input, it begins to change and give me a different output. And so the environment upon which that body, that 35-year-old woman is in, is going to change the output. And so for me, the challenge is getting the right people the right information about them and their body and what to do with their lives. And so the argument would be we should be able to find research on high, and I know this is harder to do because it's like a financial component, but women that would rate their stress scores above an 8, that maybe have a child, that still work 40 hours, that also go to the gym a lot, I think their metabolisms are going to work different. Or with a history of chronic dieting in perimenopause, all of a sudden you're going to get a different output rather than looking at maybe all women and men over a larger population. You're going to miss those variances that are particular to them. And so that's what makes it so challenging. So when somebody says, hey, my body doesn't work that way, everyone's just going to go, oh, you're just lying, or you're just full of it. It's not fair. And so you have a lot of ignorant 19 through 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, all males, saying weight loss resistance doesn't exist, adaptive thermogenesis really isn't happening.
Well, the scientists are also saying that. It's not just the 19-year-old guys.
Right.
It's the people who are educated.
And what it is, but yet no one's paying attention that we're not actually observing them, or how many people are saying stuff. And that's why we've got the survey we're going to talk about in a minute. How many people are actually starting to speak up and say, no, something's going on with me. Now, how much of them are actually something going on with them, and some of it's just more the psychology of the inner observer, like how well am I knowing what I'm doing? Because we know that people are not very good at self-account. Yeah. Like self-awareness is not strong in the average individual. So I want to get to that. But what I'm getting at is because of our lack of indifference to people when they say something is wrong, the application of diet culture and inappropriate diet methods from an early age has inappropriately and disproportionately impacted women on a major level. And so the same industries that caused it now say it doesn't exist. This irritates me on a very high level, right? And then that's where I've spent my life, right? It's where I've spent my life, which is why having conversations like with you is so great, because it's like, I want to make sure I don't have biases on one hand, to the best of my ability, but on the same thing is that I also know what I'm seeing, just like when we saw depression, anxiety, PTSD, and we said none of it was real. And now today we realize how very real those things are. So just because we haven't observed it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Remember I asked you a question, and the question was, what has remained the same about your beliefs and the data, and what has changed? We got to what was the same. And I want to know your journey, because now you're more open. You're one, and by the way, everyone should know, people who try to step out and have differences of opinions from the majority, they tend to get more scrutiny. And that can be very hard and challenging. I'm always very complimentive of people who are brave enough to seek the truth no matter where it takes them. And we don't know the full truth yet. That's what the research we're going to talk about is here for. But the people that would even brave into this space, I have a lot of reverence for. And so what has changed about your beliefs? And let's talk about how you diet, one, and also what's happening with women.
So I'd say the biggest thing with weight loss, body composition that's changed 4 years ago, 5 years ago, if you were to ask me, caloric deficits work 100% of the time. And that's an easy position for me to take, because all of the research, I don't think you'll find a study where they gave subjects a caloric deficit, a diet, and they didn't lose body weight. At least that's what I challenge my students. So that's an easy conclusion for me who reads the science. You cut your calories, you lose weight. What's changed is I'm open to the idea that maybe it is not effective for certain people at certain points of their lives. So I'm not even at a point where I can say I believe you. At least,
yeah.
If somebody says, "Hey, I can't lose weight," do I believe you? Maybe. I believe you enough where I want to invest a significant career capital to answer that question. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done that. I'm like, just diet. Stop. I don't want to say stop lying, because I'm always. I think I have empathy, but I would have said you're not really dieting. And maybe that's where I end up, that just because you think you're weight loss resistant. So that's what's changed. I'm open to the idea.
When I was 7 years old, I came down with a set of symptoms that nobody thought was real. I was having delusions, obsessive compulsive behavior, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and everybody told me it was behavioral. Just stop doing that. You know, and then later on they gave it a bunch of different names. But what really happened was I was a kid that got chemical exposure, then I got strep too many times in a row, and then now today we know, 30 years later, the condition was called PANDAS, which gave me severe OCD. And I lived with that for over 10 years before anybody actually gave me any kind of legitimate belief that what I was dealing with was real.
So a diagnosis happened 10 years later.
Yeah. And even before that, a sub-diagnosis of OCD, that's true, but that wasn't the root cause and wouldn't have been the solution by itself, therapy alone. Yeah. There had to be other things that happened. So my experience of a 7-year-old going for 20 years of being ill is that I believe that any person's job on this earth is that when somebody tells you something's happening, your first job, if you're a guide or you're a practitioner or you're a coach, is to believe them. That's like and then work backwards from there.
Yep.
Truthful until proven not, right?
Yes.
And so science does help us with some of this because there are a lot of people that say they cannot lose weight, but in fact are basing that information on false data. They have bias, recency bias, and they have, I think, self-bias in that they're not observing their behaviors and knowing what's in calories in the food and versus their activity and how their body's acclimating over time, and now it doesn't have as strong of a metabolic rate as it may used to have. You would think that as people gain more biomass, we find that that's not always true, that eventually there's an evening out of calories in versus biomass. People continue to tend to build weight even if calories maintain and they're obese, which tends to reflect we do lose metabolic capacity per cell or per piece of unit of tissue, a pound of tissue. At some point, the body's got these adaptive principles. But that being said, when somebody says they cannot lose weight, I would say at least half of those people, the only thing that's happening is that they are over consumer calories, not moving enough, and don't realize that it's happening. And I think that would be a fair assessment.
And that was my question, like what percentage? And can I also add to that? I think there's a comparison of this. Let's just say this is a middle-aged woman who's 50 years old. She's dieting. She's always dieted, and it's worked. She's going back to when she was 23, 33, when her body responded a lot easier. Not even menopause. Let's just say age. Or maybe you're and when you're 33, you do move more probably than when you're 50, just because.
Absolutely.
So I think there's also,
but less than when you were 15.
Yes. So I think you used the term recency bias. It's This isn't working. This used to work.
Yes.
Well, that's where I would want to check you. Don't compare yourself to the 20-year prior you. Like that's an errand in foolishness, so to speak. So I think there's also some of that. Like this used to work, but it's not working now. Okay, but when we went back to when you were 33, you did this for 3 months and saw a result. Now it's only been 2 weeks and you're ready to throw in the towel.
Yes, exactly. So there's that too. And so I want to make sure, I want to try to be the functional health guy that bridges what we're seeing in the population that we haven't studied yet versus what the science is already saying, because we still need to take that into account. We cannot get in our own little soap or little echo chamber and get lost and say it's just insulin or it's just thyroid or it's seed oils or it's like glycophosphate. Like I don't want to go so far and get myself into an echo chamber and then not be useful to you at home, because that's not helpful. But if we don't open ourselves up to the possibility that there are things occurring in the population that we have not observed yet, and when we look at this large subpopulation of women, we can see, no matter what we want to say about what is happening, what we already have noticed in research, and that's why I have my research team. I've got a team of dietitians that will research stuff for me. We were looking there's already observable things that happen in adaptive thermogenesis. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. We know that a chronic dieter, that as you diet, your body will adapt in observable ways, in short-term models. What I believe, because of inappropriate dieting early on, I think that adaptive thermogenesis grows out of control to the point where it would appear that you can't lose weight. So even if these women are overeating a little bit more, or I think adults in general, not paying attention to calories or not paying attention to their activity, I still think, because of the history that they've been in, that there's still varying degrees of poorly running metabolisms that could be primed to work at optimum, and then this wouldn't be a problem. So what I'm getting at is because of our obsession with losing weight and eating less calories all the time, we have accidentally not shown people how their metabolisms could be at 100 and how they can hold muscle. And so because nobody's ever trying to optimize their metabolism, they're going back out into the world. They are having adaptive thermogenesis. They are having things that suppress their metabolism. And they're also, so it also can be true that you're not paying attention to your calories and your activity, but also can be true is that the metabolism of the average woman and man is slowing down. I say both can be true at the same time. That would be my argument. What would you say to that?
What I've seen in my own lab on a subject-by-subject basis, the subjects this goes back to muscle, can't get away from it. The subjects that lose muscle are the ones that experience adaptive thermogenesis. Their metabolism slow down more so than what we would predict with the weight loss.
Yes.
What I've also observed do you
want to tell people real quick, because I forget, I do this when I get with high-level individuals. Can you explain what adaptive thermogenesis or thermogenesis is?
Yeah, so adaptive thermogenesis, well, more broadly, when you lose weight, let me just give numbers examples. Let's say your metabolic rate is 2,000 calories. So that's how many calories you're going to burn over 24 hours. You weigh 200 pounds, your metabolic rate is 2,000 calories. You lose 20 pounds. Now you're down from 200 to 180. Your metabolism will naturally slow down. Metabolism matches your body mass. If I gain 50 pounds, my metabolism is going to go up. I have more mass to have to feed and to generate energy for. So adaptive thermogenesis is where your metabolic rate slows down more than what would be predicted from the weight loss alone. So it's a slowing down. And again, what I've observed in my lab, and as I look at, here's what I do in my own research. I'll look at somebody's RMR change after a diet, not even look at lean mass, and I'll look at that, and I will predict, oh yeah, they lost lean mass, or they maintained it. So in my lab, it's so closely tied. Yeah. So again, that goes back to whether we call it my bias or my observation. Yeah. Muscle is key, and adaptive thermogenesis. We can also trace that back to crash dieting approaches. Yeah. Always work against you in the long term, in part or maybe in full because of adaptive thermogenesis. Yeah,
and when we see adaptive thermogenesis then continue to scale, that's when and there are plenty of things we can see. We're insulin resistance, leptin resistance. We can see, number one, very obvious, the decline in testosterone. We can see the decline in thyroid hormone. And there's been plenty of studies that I can cite that show that after crash dieting or prolonged dieting for too long, because that's the other thing. This is one of the things that your opinion has kind of changed on, and what I wanted to talk. It's quite possible that it sounds good to be lower calorie, just not intensely for long periods of time. But in fact, that might be part of the problem.
Yes. Yes. Diets that go on and on and on. One, that's not conducive to building muscle. It's not conducive to maintaining muscle.
Right, because your research found that caloric deficits do create anabolic resistance or protein or resist or suppress protein synthesis.
That was not out of my lab. That's
Okay.
research that I've relied on. So basically, the tagline is dieting is not your friend if you're trying to build or maintain muscle.
Right.
And that's why I think you've been doing it in practice. I've done it in my lab. Well, we're currently doing a second study. What if we were aggressive for very short periods?
Yeah, that's what I want to get to, with the build up to the answer to this whole thing. It's funny because you're starting to study it in your lab, and we just stumbled upon it trying to find solutions. But it went into a field of like faux pas. It's like, oh, you shouldn't diet really deeply. Like you need to go lower calorie, but not too much.
Yes,
and
not
for
too
a
aggressive.
long time. And I think you and I are both going to come to the conclusion, and I think you've kind of
Well, I've got data now.
yeah, right. We got data coming that in fact that might be more of the problem. So that's why, again, people going from diet culture into fitness nutrition, some of the standard fitness nutrition that was out there for a while is actually working against some people. And so it compounds on the societal problem. So that's one of the reasons I'm so big about this is that we don't want people going to a coach for a solution and get more of the problem.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And so that's a problematic. So then you see it in thyroid numbers. And you're seeing subclinical hypothyroid in massive amounts. It's one of the most diagnosed things today.
And real quick, when you make that statement, is your mind going to T3, TSH,
Yeah,
or
so
the
when
whole
you say
panel?
so when you say subclinical hypothyroidism, it can be diagnosed in three ways. One is a TSH above a 2.5. You look at it like I'd say like a free T3 that's that starts to get in the twos, and then you're looking at
So you don't like it in the twos?
It's not that it can't be there, but the data is pretty clear that if you start a diet phase, and there's cool research on this, I'd love to share it with you.
Yeah.
If your diet phase, if you start and your T3 is below a 3.2, you will struggle with performance issues and plateaus. And they even see it in athletes, same thing. So if an athlete, so they've measured this in both like rugby and other long distance sports, men and women, you'll start to see performance issues where you're not running as well or as long or as fast or you're not progressing anymore. And you begin to see that, through the season, T3 drops, DHEA drops, cortisol will go up and then begin to drop. Insulin will begin to drop. And so it's interesting how these things also happen in a diet phase when heavy resistance training is applied or low calorie is applied. But one of the canaries in the cave that is clear that is a performance enhancer is supporting people's thyroid. For endurance and for a lot of things. So you'll start to see these performance issues happen if your start T3 is below 3.2. Now, I do, like, one of the things, and I don't want to get too off because this podcast will go forever.
But I'll come back.
We're going to come back. But ectomorphic females are more sensitive to hormones than endomorphic females. Therefore, their levels can be lower and maintain optimal performance. That's why you can have an ectomorphic muscular female that's at a 2.6 T3 and she feels great. It's not having any effect on metabolism, but you can take an endomorphic female, who is at a 3.1 and it's not enough.
Yep.
Right? So that there is that thing. So, but again, and then also basal temperature. We start to see women, so we see all these adaptations begin to occur. They start to sweat less, they feel colder, their basal temperature is beginning to drop, and they start swelling more water retention, and now they stop losing weight. And this is where you see the biggest component of that in the menopausal female.
Yep.
Right? In the menopausal female, which brings me to my next point. Why in the heck would a physique enhancement, sports nutrition, 200 abstracts and research papers, why the heck all of a sudden would you get into women's health?
Well, I've always studied women's body composition.
Okay.
But it's always been, well, it's actually my career is kind of morphed. I started my career in studying women with obesity. Then I got into women's physique enhancement, so maybe not bodybuilders, but in some cases bodybuilders. I've tested some of the top 5 Olympia competitors' body composition.
Yeah.
But basically women who resistance train but are metabolically healthy and young. So why the change? Well, I'm thinking about this. My whole career has been defined as the scientist who observes what's going on in the real world. So as an example, when flexible dieting became very popular in the teens, 2012, 13, 14, I came along, and you know Lauren Conlon.
Yeah, big fan.
She came to my lab, got her master's degree. She designed a study. I was her mentor. People are saying that you can choose your macros and it doesn't matter how you do them. And everybody was doing this for years. I came along with Lauren and we said, let's put this to the test. And we said, yeah, makes sense. Meal plan or choosing your foods, equal. Fast forward a couple years, diet breaks. Coaches are constantly, I'm doing diet breaks and they're working. So I did a diet break study, okay? Refeeds, increasing carbs on the weekends. People are doing this in the field. I come along later and say, yeah, actually, this looks like it's helpful.
So let's say that. So there's a couple things that you've observed that has changed for you. Diet breaks are a good idea.
Well, I don't even want to say that I changed. It's just that I'm setting the stage for my career has been, what are people doing in the real world? I come along. I'm not pioneering. I'm just validating. This makes sense in the lab. This makes sense in the lab. This makes sense in the lab.
Yeah.
So we mentioned flexible dieting. We mentioned diet breaks. We mentioned carbohydrate refeeds.
Yep.
Now let's fast forward to today. Reverse diets. We're just about to end our study on reverse diets. And if we want to use you as an example, you in practice were using aggressive fat loss protocols in, I'm going to assume, menopause.
Yes.
So now I'm coming along. You know, you've been doing it for 5 years. Well, Campbell guy here, Johnny come late to the party. And now I'm going to validate, that seems like a good idea, or hey, we're not seeing it.
Absolutely.
So back to the question, why am I interested in this? Well, I've gotten too many coaches. I communicate with a lot of coaches, and I communicate with a lot of people. By the way, maybe I'm an odd scientist. I spend a significant amount of time on my phone, on Instagram, communicating directly with people, answering questions. I love it. It keeps me grounded. So the latest thing that's been impressed upon me was women, typically almost always in their 40s and 50s. I'm gaining all this weight, and I'm doing all the same stuff. I'm tracking all my calories, and I can't lose weight. So now I'm like, oh, well, let me study that. So I'm not doing anything different than what I've done my whole life.
Okay.
I'm coming along and saying, you say you can't lose weight when you're dieting? Yeah. Let me test it in my lab. So there's the answer to the question.
Yeah. And so, I think, one of the things that comes up, and then also I believe too, you've been personally impacted by this phenomena.
Oh, right? My wife.
In your home. That's one of the. Is it okay if?
Yeah. Yep. Nope.
Okay.
I've got the wife's permission.
Okay, because like I said, we don't want to make the boss mad. Okay. All right. We both got to go home. And she was impacted when she went into menopause.
Immensely.
Yes.
Immensely.
And it was a dramatic change. And so you got to see
on a lot of levels, not just gains in body fat.
Right.
But that was where I'll just tell the story real quick. I'm getting all these stories, and I'm like, yeah, just diet harder. Like, I'm part of the problem, probably. I never would say that. Then when it hit home, when my wife's going through menopause, she gained a lot of weight, along with multiple other more important issues, I might add. But I'm the fat loss guy. I can help her lose fat. She's dieted off and on her whole life. She's a fit lady. She wanted to be really lean sometimes. Of course, I'm the fat loss guy. I can help. I couldn't help her. I could not help my wife lose fat. And I'm like, so these hundreds and now thousands of women and coaches who've reached out to me saying this is a thing, I get it now. Yeah. So if I'm going to be honest, it's not just the communications. It's the fact that it hit home.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm so glad you shared that. That's powerful.
Yeah. Yep. And it's a never-ending. And now we're into hormone. I mean,
now you got to study it all.
Yes. Yeah. And we've had a lot of talks. And thank you for your advice in just sharing what you would recommend for my wife. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's exactly it, though. When man loves his wife enough, he's gonna search the ends of the earth of why this observable thing is happening.
Oh, the house of cards will crumble without my wife. Like, I have to have my wife. So, whatever. Yeah.
Shout out to the missus there. Okay, so let's get into the final, like, some of the great stuff here. So now, you're kind of almost creating a new metabolic institute, really, and where you're really looking at Okay, first, let's survey the problem. So that's what you've done. So you were gracious enough to allow me to be a part of it with you, and we did like a weight loss resistance survey, basically.
Let me just say, we did a very, and again, I'll come back, we'll talk, we can't do it all today.
Yeah, we can't, but just in
But
general, high note.
we did the most comprehensive menopause fitness survey in history.
Yes.
Massive. I wanted your advice on a lot of things, but particularly the hormone replacement therapy. But part of this was to finally get in the literature. Or do you think you're weight loss resistant? Let's just, if it's not a problem, if it's just random people reaching out to me, but if we survey women, and again, when I say women, actually it's pre, peri, and post-menopause. So women in fitness, I think it was 30 to 75 years old. One of the questions was, are you weight loss resistant? And that's defined as the things that you used to do, like dieting and increasing exercise, they used to work and help you lose weight, but now are no longer working, or they don't work as well as it used to. So that was kind of how it was defined. So yes, we surveyed thousands of women and asked them that question, along with like 119 other questions.
Right. And what did we find in the survey?
We found a lot more women answering that question yes than I ever would have predicted.
Right.
And let me be the jerk
70,
for a moment.
75, and 80, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so approximately 70% of premenopausal women said that they are experiencing weight loss resistance, and this would only be applicable to the women who are dieting. Right. So if they said, "I'm not trying to lose weight," we didn't. So out of the women who were dieting, 70% of premenopausal women said, "Yes, this describes me." Approximately 75% of perimenopausal women and approximately 80% of postmenopausal women
said that they were having weight loss resistance.
that they are experiencing weight loss resistance.
So here we have the crux of it. Either Instagram is right, and every 20-year-old to 35 to 45-year-old male who doesn't believe this exists and talks about it on social media, and the scientists, either they're right, I guess, in one way, which would mean that over 80% of menopausal female are wrong. We surveyed over how many people?
I think we have around 5,000 respondents.
Right. So you got
Now, I don't know how many answered that question.
It was close to that. It was close to that number when I was looking at it.
Okay.
So you got nearly 5,000 women, and 80% of them in certain subpopulations of that. So even if you're looking at, let's say, 2,500 to 3,000 of the women say, I've got a problem. Something's happening to me, but the world says it isn't happening. So that's where we got the crux of it. So now you can really say, it's like, hey, no matter what, there's enough people who believe that they have this, that it is worth going deeper into the research, which is also what you're
justifies the next step.
Justifies the next step. So for everybody listening out there, no matter where you fall on whether weight loss resistance is real, women believe it's really happening. So why don't we research it and back them up? You know, and so
If only there was a researcher that was.
If there was only a researcher with the courage to step out. That's why we're here today.
Yes.
You know, and then so to the woman who's listening to this that says, okay, this is great. What can I do because I'm weight loss resistant now? Or what can I tell my daughter who's beginning to become body conscious? And how do I help them successfully manage weight loss or body composition so that they can be healthy, look great, feel great, and maintain it for a very long time and not run into what I had to happen to me? And so what would be some things that we're finding out about, you know, diet that are actually effective?
To prevent the potential for weight loss resistance?
Yep.
This is just purely, I don't think that we have any research on this for me to rely on, but I would say let's avoid perpetual dieting.
Yeah.
Don't spend your life in a caloric deficit.
Right.
Move. Embrace a fitness lifestyle.
Yeah.
It would crush me. I have 2 daughters, teenagers. I never want them to have the thought of dieting, because that's, man, and again, I guess I'm blessed in the sense that they don't, but man, that's sad to me, to have a young child that even has to think about dieting and worrying, like that just crushes my spirit. I hate the thought of that.
Yeah.
But if that's the case they're in, one, I would just challenge parents. That is your responsibility. Don't have the stuff in the house. Go for walks. And this is where I get a little angry. Put the device. Do not. Now, within reason.
Of course.
Just a pet peeve. I saw parents in my neighborhood walking outside and their toddler in the stroller. What a beautiful sight. The toddler had an iPad. I'm like, you're in nature. It just hurts
I get that.
soul. So, back to your question. Sorry to get on my soapbox and rant there.
Yeah.
Just do everything you can to prevent a perpetual dieting mindset.
Right.
So what can we do to get them out of? Yeah. And I think the answer to that is like embracing a fitness lifestyle. Yeah. Going from if they're sedentary, they likely have a dysregulated appetite. Yeah. Let's get it regulated.
Yeah. I think teaching them about balanced dieting is great, or balanced eating, right? I think keeping fiber up and protein up is imperative. If you know your daughter's going to start reducing her calories because she's body conscious, which everyone does hit when they're about 13 to 17 years old and they're going to be active, let's make sure we maintain protein to maintain muscle mass.
Great point.
Stop hyperphagia and hyperplasia from an early age. Full stop.
Yep.
Right there.
You're going to be more full if you do that too.
Yes. So we have to introduce that, and that means parents have to introduce that from a very, very early age. And then I would say to the weight loss resistant woman or the woman that's starting to have problems, what we're realizing is that, and what I know to be true today, is that you need to feed yourself and then have intentional periods where calories get really low, maintain a certain level of protein intake. But to me, protein sparing fasting or intentional extreme low calorie and then bringing your calories back up to where they were is probably the best way to lose fat and maintain muscle. Mm-hmm. And to make sure that you then don't have to be in long-term dieting situations. And we're finding that is true. In our office, I mean, I've done over 10,000 BIAs, 10,000 over my life, BIA tests.
Yeah.
Insane amount, because we got obsessed with it. And now today when we're trying to look at DEXAs or if we're using a vitamin shot BIA or whatever, and I know some of those aren't the gold standard, but even as we're looking at it today, where we have someone, instead of having them just diet normal ways, we're having them feast and fast through feast-fast periods, maybe 4-3, 5-2, 3-3, 7-3. We're getting close to almost 90 in some cases to 95% once you eliminate water of the tissue that's left over being lost as fat.
That's a home run.
Now, also, we're trying to make sure we support their hormones, make sure they keep them supported, and some of that stuff plays a part. Where if I take a bodybuilder, high-protein dieting, longer progression of dieting, carb cycling, whatever, I'm doing the best I can get out of a bodybuilder who is not who's not using performance enhancers. The best year I'm getting 70%. I started using fast feast technologies, and I'm getting closer to 75, 80, 85, 90.
Yep.
So it's changed everything. Like, what do we do now? And so now we're changing everything to try to get people to stay intentional higher calorie, and then periods of short-term, very intense low calorie. Thoughts?
Well, I can validate that approach with our current research. We haven't published the data. In fact, the data's still ongoing. We had a subject this morning early, but we presented preliminary data at the same conference where we presented our survey study. And our approach is a 4-day, very low-calorie diet. It's basically 300 to 400 calories.
You're going to malnourish them. You're starving them. That's bad, Bill.
I know.
Shame.
I'm the hypocrite because for years there's probably very few people who've railed against this approach more than me.
Me too.
Yes. So they're the hypocrites at the table. In addition to 300 to 400 calories, and let me just talk about the diet. We have them eating 1.6 grams or 0.75 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and with as minimal additional carbs and fat. So as much as pure protein as they can eat for 4 days straight.
Kind of almost carnivore.
Yeah, yes. So they're doing that for 4 days straight, and they're walking 6 hours per day and no resistance training. So for 4 days. Then we have them go back to maintenance for 3 days, and then they come back to my lab, because if we tested them right after there's 4 days, that's the water's so messed up that we're not going to get a valid body composition. So we do test them on that 4th day, or the morning after, so on day 5. But day 5, 6, 7, go back to their pre-diet calories, basically get their fluids back up to normal. We retest them. I've got data I can share, and then we say, come back in a month and do whatever you want, because what we don't want to do is exactly what the Minnesota starvation, the infantry army subjects, what we don't want is we just starved them for 4 days. Is that going to cause a hyperphagic response? Is that going to cause a metabolic adaptation so that when they come back 30 days later, they have more body fat than what they started with?
Yes.
We want to document that.
Yes.
And so far, the data is, and in fact, the data is so good, I'm extending the study. It's all positive. Women are losing body fat. All but one. We have about 9 subjects completed. They gain lean mass. How do you gain lean mass when you're walking? I don't know, but they are.
Yes.
And we're using a 3-compartment model, which means we're pulling water data from the in-body and body volume from a bod pod, and we're also getting ultrasound data.
Which is one of the most legitimate ways that you can track body composition.
Yes, and we are using an assumed bone mineral density content, but bone mineral density is not going to change in 4 days. Can't do it.
Yeah.
So we know that we talked about this earlier. Walking can increase muscle mass in sedentary people. That's what I've always thought. For whatever reason, in these women, by the way, to get into our study, they have to be fit. They have to be, I don't know what the BMI or body composition is, but they have to have been resistance training for, I think, at least a year.
Right.
And I'll tell you, you want to see some of the fittest late 50-year-old women, they've done this study. They are. And we're using your company for the blood work. The initial plan was, let's just get a few premenopausal, a few perimenopausal, and a few postmenopausal women. But now that I'm looking at the results, I'm like, we got to add to this, because if women want to lose body fat, and some of these women say they can't, but now they are.
Yes.
We're obligated to put more resources into this. So again, I know you've done this for, I don't know for how many years.
Many years now.
It is awesome.
It's changed everything about the way I want people dieting.
Yeah.
It's changed everything, and I have to turn a lot of my beliefs about fasting. I had to change my beliefs about fasting, simulated fasting, and protein-sparing fasting.
That's
which is
really
kind of
what
you're
this
doing.
is.
Protein-sparing fasting.
Yeah, and maybe if we didn't, maybe we just fasted. Let's say we did that for 4 days. Maybe they wouldn't lose lean mass.
I'm not seeing it.
But
I'm not
you
seeing
actually
it.
do a complete fast for how
not
many
seeing it.
days?
Sometimes we'll walk them into 3 days.
Okay, and they're still maintaining.
Yes.
Yeah, so the way I'm explaining this is it's so aggressive such that the body says, I have to respond to this aggressive walking and starving, essentially. But the body's only responding by losing body fat. And because the diet is not long enough, or it's so short, it's not long enough to shed lean mass.
And part of why we believe it's happening is we're measuring GKI scores, glucose ketones, and GKI, which is a measurement of both.
Yeah, so we are not getting that.
Yeah, GKI. And what we're seeing is if you get too much protein, you don't go into ketosis. But if you get your protein way down, where you're getting into the 300, they're getting into ketosis pretty quickly. And research shows that for the most part, ketosis is muscle protective, for the most part. And so we believe that that's an autophagy index. And we believe part of it's growth hormone. And so we come back to anabolic resistance, which we've talked about in dieting before. And next episode, we'll have to do that. Well, I love that topic of human growth hormone and IGF-1. But we believe that the body starts supporting its IGF-1 levels and growth hormone levels at those levels. And so that's why you're even seeing a little bit of muscle growth. We believe it's giving it a little bit of a stimulus. Now, would that last forever? No, absolutely not. I think we're looking at short-term models. But we're seeing that is protecting muscle. Same thing that you're seeing. We've observed it long enough now that we know it's true, and so then we're playing with different variations. The more chronically dieted somebody is, the lower that number has to be to create that, because they have more metabolic adaptation. So there's more adaptive thermogenesis that has occurred in that person over time that requires that caloric intake to be low enough to stimulate that response.
Yes.
And so that's what's interesting. And so that's why I love what you're doing. So everybody hearing this, it would appear that as you get older or as you diet, short-term intensity, maintain protein, and walk a lot. And that could be one of the biggest solutions, I think, in diet history, what you're talking about right now.
Well, when we publish this, you watch what happens to the industry.
I can't wait.
I mean, well, your people are already doing it.
But it's going to validate. They tried to cancel me, Bill. For everybody out there, what the research he's doing, y'all tried to cancel me, and now he's proven it was right.
I will add, we're not testing ketones on purpose, but we have these. It's like it's the urine sticks.
Yeah.
We're mainly. I was concerned about hydration.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not. I mean that too, but mainly. We live in Florida. You're walking 6 hours
Absolutely.
a day. So we just said, so we did give them a electrolyte solution. Hey, so we want to make sure at the end of every day, are you hydrated or not? But those sticks also do have a ketosis measure. Now, again, it's not a value. It's just.
I know.
So what they are. And the women who chose to send us back the photos, they don't have to. They're in ketosis by the end of the second day, is what we're seeing.
Exactly. Where if you don't get down that low and your protein's 100% of your diet, you usually don't get into ketosis. The body will just convert the protein into sugar, so you stay in.
No, but these are mostly. I mean, again, it's probably 90% protein is what they are.
Right. Yeah. Right. But if you know anything about ketogenic diets,
I've done them. I've done them.
If your protein gets up above 20%, sometimes it kind of kick you in and out. It takes longer to get into ketosis. So here you are in a short-term model, but because you're bringing that protein, you're keeping the protein, but the calories go so low.
So low, yes.
The autophagy kicks in, ketones release. Yep. So you're getting that acetylcholine A function in the liver and then getting that release.
Yep.
And so that's what's fascinating about this and why I'm such a big fan of what you're doing, and I know it's the future, and I can't wait for you to prove it to them.
Yes.
Now, we have to allow the scientific method to be the scientific method, so we don't know yet.
Yeah, so far, what I just shared, it's every single subject.
Yeah.
And again, now that I want to recruit more, and it's not easy to recruit for this study because you got to give up 4 days of your life. You have to come to my lab in Tampa 4 times over 30 days, and you really got to give up 4 days of your life to walk.
Remind me next time we talk, I want to talk about research participants in research because I think it's a huge factor that also plays into everything that we're talking about. Dr. Bill Campbell, it's an honor to know you and a pleasure just to spend the time and do. I could do this for 17 hours, but I know producer Keone has to edit this footage, and he's already got enough, man. I can't wait to have you back.
I'm coming back.
I'm going to come back. All right, and we're going to get an update where the research is at and how the next study that you're going to do, you're going to do the weight loss resistance study, and we're going to prove whether it does or doesn't exist. Right?
I'm on the case.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Awesome.